Algorithms are going to that as sure as we're having this conversation. There's no doubt. They want to shake out the longs and they want to get people short. And what do the smart people do that are on the bottom of these algorithms that are scooping this stuff up? They're feeding into these people. That's what algorithms do. I'm able to take advantage of what they're giving me. Printing the money, man. That's what we do. And we do it every day, hundreds of times.
In terms of market makers and hunting stops, there's a big thing in the retail space of like price hitting your stop loss, then going completely the other way,
Correct.
and people feeling very targeted. I've heard you say that that is a case, that is something that does take place.
Yes, you're 100% right. I started focusing on the algorithms a very long time ago. It wasn't my will, I was an agent. Algorithms are there to create volatility and liquidity. They want to trap. One of the trades that lose money 85, 90% of the time is when you sell a failed breakdown. Those algorithms know that. You just know it. And I know that those algorithms are going to make that print. And they're programmed in to go to those strike prices. A lot of retail traders, they all make the same mistake. The important thing is for retail traders is
The number one podcast in the trading space, the fastest growing, and that's thanks to every single one of you. Welcome back, everyone, to the Words of Rizdom podcast. We are back once again and still the number one podcast in the trading space and the fastest growing thanks to all of you and our incredible guests. Talking of which, we have a true veteran with us today. He first set foot on the New York Stock Exchange in 1965. So in 1 year's time, that will make 60 years. Absolutely incredible, the amount of knowledge that is going to be shared here with us today. At one point, he was responsible for 90% of the volume traded in IBM, which was almost 20% at one point of the S&P. And I am proud and honored to announce that we have Richie Naso with us today.
thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
I'm trying to work on my intros. But Richie, it's an absolute honor, like I said. And
Thank you.
where we like to just start off with is sort of how you got into trading. Like what were the mindset going into trading, especially at that time, you know, the New York Stock Exchange as well.
Yeah.
Where was your mindset? Why trading in the first
Yeah,
place?
it's pretty amazing. You know, first of all, I thank the good Lord because I couldn't have carved out a better situation for myself without really knowing what I was doing. You know, I started out in a typical, my family is a typical Italian family growing up in Queens, New York. But I grew up in a very tough neighborhood. And although I was a very big sports fanatic in everything I did, at sometimes in high levels, like getting a scholarship to high school for basketball. Um, and and so, you know, I formed many baseball teams and many softball teams and traveled around the tri-state area playing for money. Okay. My family had bingo games going on at the end of Sunday dinners at my grandmother's house. The kids always wanted to use their real money to play bingo with the older people. Okay. I grew up in a Queens neighborhood, a very tough Queens neighborhood, and pitched quarters against the wall, traded picture cards and flipped picture cards for money. Played poker for money, played anything for money, played anything. I once sat in my basement at 15 years old, and I'm prefacing this on a reason, on purpose. I once sat in my basement and had 4 decks of cards faced upside down, backwards, so I couldn't see what I was doing. I placed a baseball hat against the wall, against the wall. And I stood there for hours, days and hours at a time, flipping those cards against the wall and counting up what suit just fell into the hat. Didn't know what I was flipping. At the end of the day, no matter what I did, the club suit always came out on top. Gave me an edge. If I'm playing poker, if I'm playing Klondike poker, and I played with bookmakers and I played with the best wise guys, I play with everybody. But always clubs came out. So if there were 3 clubs on the board in Klondike poker, and there was one card in the deck that had to be pulled out, and I had 3 clubs and one on the board, and I needed a club, I know what I was doing. If I needed a diamond, I probably would have folded.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the level. And you know, I had no real idea of what my future would be. And so it was a unbelievable, you know, the experience of winning and losing, you cannot replicate. I tell people on my sessions to this day, well, I'm going to go on a simp account. I'm going to go on a simp account. I said, do yourself a favor. You're not going to learn anything on a simp account. The reason you're not, because you're not risking anything. You got to feel the emotions of risking. You got to feel what it is to lose. You can't, everything is not fun and games. So anyway, it was a tremendous preparation for me to walk in there. Graduating high school, they all started in with the yearbooks, and they all wrote these salutations of what they're going to be in life. How they knew that at 17, I don't know, but they all knew it. They all knew it. I had one line. I put one word, and that was business. Did I know what business was, where it was, what kind of business it was? No, I didn't. I just wrote business. I mean, I sold encyclopedias door to door. I mean, I was a manager trainee for John's Bargain Store. People in this part of the country will know what that was. Um, you know, soup to nuts across the board. Delivering newspapers at 5:30 in the morning. Stuffing groceries at the supermarket for a quarter a day, whatever the hell it was. Stuff like that. But I'm saying this for a reason.
Mm.
Nothing is an accident, folks. Really, nothing. It's all predetermined. Nothing is an accident.
And so when did trading come into your sort of path?
Yeah. So I never traded a stock in my life. I didn't have the money. I saw an ad in New York Times that said, Wall Street Runner or whatever they called it. I said, oh, New York Stock Exchange. That's impressive to me. Yeah, I'm going to go and apply for this job. So I put on my Easter suit, the only suit I owned. It only came out once or twice a year, and and walked into the stock exchange, filled out an application, got hired. I want to say one other thing. And I want to say one other thing because it's important, the way things are supposed to work out. My first job interview was for an assistant accountant at a bookkeeping firm, okay? And I didn't get the job. But the woman, I didn't get the job because I tested worse than the kid who was looking for the same job. But the HR person, or whatever they were called in that day, came up to me and said, I'm sorry, but I have to hire the other. He got hired on a test. But she said, I know I'm making a mistake. And that was the end of that. Then I went to Wall Street. Then I got this clerk, a job as a runner on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. That simple. But I remember one thing, and one thing to know, I found a home. When they suited me up, you had a special jacket, blah, blah, blah. And then you walked into that trading room. They escorted you into that room. It was like it was like you got hit with a boulder. I mean, the energy that came out of that room that I felt went through my bones, from the toe to top of my head down to my top of my bottom of my toes, man. It was stupid. It was like, oh my God. I had no idea. No idea.
Hmm.
And that was it. I was hooked. After that, I just did what I did. I did my studying. I did my due diligence. I passed whatever I had to pass. I was not a great student in school. I didn't care. I didn't think they were teaching me anything, quite frankly. And I rose through the ranks in New York Stock Exchange as a runner, and then as a reporter, somebody who recorded all the sales that took place. And after 9 months, they offered me a job as a clerk. As a clerk. What is a clerk? A clerk is a trainee, but they work for a firm. That was a big step because that puts you on a level where you could start to advance if you were good enough to advance. Nobody gave you anything. And I had a hard time, I can tell you. Honestly, I had a really hard time because I couldn't understand what a quote was. I didn't understand what a bid and offer was. I really didn't. I mean, I was a workaholic, but I couldn't get it through. Okay. So my boss at the time sent me up to the over-the-counter desk, over the counter. Over the counter was rock and roll. There was no NASDAQ. This was 1,000 people making markets in every stock on the planet that wasn't listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And this was Dodge City. Check your pockets, I'll tell you that. it, it was Dodge City. But when you were making markets, it was the best education I ever got, because after that, it just all came together.
Hmm.
I went down to the trading floor again, dot, 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 and just kept moving up on a trading floor, where I got the confidence of many, many different companies that called me, to represent them, to be their clerk, and to stuff like that.
One thing you said there, which really stood out to me, was nothing was ever handed to anyone on the
Correct.
floor. Can you just speak on that a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was never handed anything, but the good news is that I didn't want to be handed anything. I have a sibling that was handed everything, but I never wanted to be handed everything. I always wanted to earn it, and so it fit my personality real well, because when you're competing against other people, the best comes out. And if you know the job that you could do, and if you know what you're capable of doing, and you have confidence in what you're doing, you are going to beat these other people. And I mean, that's the way it is. That's capitalism. That's it. You want to get a job, you want to do better than somebody else, you just do the best you can, and you automatically better than somebody else, as long as you don't cheat along the way, as long as you put in the time. That's where the confidence comes from, putting in the time. You need to be a student of the game.
How important is that mindset going into something like the floor, where were there even at that time people who would be entitled and think they deserved something, think they,
Oh, sure.
had done enough time and therefore they should get something?
Oh, sure. I love to compete against those people, because that was easy stuff. It was just easy, and especially on the floor. This New York Stock Exchange floor has a very high tradition in heritage.
Mm.
Okay, the specialist system had lines of heritage, grandfathers, grandfathers to sons to sons. All right, and many of the specialist firms had heritage like that running through them. So conversely speaking, to answer your question, a lot of the offsprings of these senior people, if you will, they thought that this was easy life for them. They were like, they already had money. They knew they were getting money, and so, you know, it's good to compete against those people. That's all
Mhm.
I could say. When you're a kid that comes from a rough neighborhood, and you're able to work your way up through it, and you find yourself in an arena, where people think they deserve something, you stand out.
Mm. Going back to what you said about your sort of upbringing into the trading journey, you mentioned about essentially everything was winning and losing. Everything was trying to play those odds. How important was that when you're coming into the New York Stock Exchange? Was it simply just some like almost familiar to you? Was it something that you just thought this is just a larger game of what I've played before?
Um, Intellectually, at that point, no, no. But somehow, some way, my system knew it. I did not I did not recognize it at first. I really did not. It was, I don't know, a couple years, 2, 3 years, where I started realizing, forget it. And I started moving up quicker than a lot of people were
Mm.
moving up. And then I figured out, and the answer to your question is at one point, but not from the beginning. Not from the beginning. I knew I belonged there because of the energy. And I knew that's what drives me. And that's what's always driven me, no matter what I did. So from that perspective, the energy was just, oh my God, this is my home. This is
Mm.
where I belong. And I remember, I said, wow, when I got my first job, I was making $60 a week. That was the pay in 1960,
Wow.
65. $60 a week. I cleared $48.12. And that's what I remember. And I remember also, I said to myself, wow, if I can my goal was to make $40,000 a year. That was my goal. And now I'm dead serious. That was my goal, to make $40,000 a year, which was a lot of money at that time.
Yeah.
So,
In terms of, as you said, in terms of the energy, I'm sure there would have been people who would have gone there, and rather than energy, they would have said chaos, would have said something maybe more of a negative feeling because they couldn't handle it,
You're right.
right? And what was it about you that felt that energy instead? What was it about the energy on the floor that really resonated with you and wanted you to
The
be there?
gambling instincts,
Mhm.
the gambling instincts. There were 2 times I had that feeling in my life. Once, I was in the Marine Corps and stationed in 29 Palms, California, which is only 2 or 3 hours away from Las Vegas. I'd never been to Las Vegas. I'd never been anywhere. And the same feeling as when I walked into a Las Vegas casino,
Mhm.
but that was second to the New York Stock Exchange. The gambling mecca of Las Vegas is second to the gambling that goes on every day and to what I did. Nothing comes close to that. Nothing.
What would you say is the separation then between the gambling and the trading? I'm sure there were traders on the
Yeah.
floor who were so emotional that you
Oh
could
yeah.
call it gambling. But then what would separate those from the traders to the gamblers? Let's take a break for a minute there, guys, because I want to let you know about one of our sponsors. Alpha Futures is offering the best one-step evaluations in the industry. And in the month of December, they have no activation fees. They have the largest end-of-day based drawdowns in the entire industry, with up to 90% profit split and lightning fast payout speeds, and offering advanced and standard accounts to fit your needs. Alpha Futures is truly offering the most elite plans for the lowest total cost to entry in the industry. You can start as low as $79. And thanks to the podcast, using code RIZ, R-I-Z, you can get 20% off any of those challenges. Go to the link in the description below, and let's get back to the episode.
Gamblers take risks. I say it in my sessions all the time. Folks, we're not here to gamble, okay? We're not here to gamble. If you're in a Las Vegas casino, they don't want you in there if you bet 58, if you win 58.9% of the time, okay? They don't want you in there, all right? I take pride in figuring out uh, the nuances that lead to a trading decision, and there are a lot of them, and they change rapidly. They don't stay the same. You can go in and gamble in a Las Vegas casino, and you know what the odds are. You know what you're doing. You know you have a disadvantage at every bet except one in the whole casino, where the house does not have an advantage. But I say it all the time. I say, look, I'm not here to gamble. I said, don't laugh because I'm dead serious. I'm not here to gamble. I am here to have make a bet, and I'm here to be on the right side of the percentages of that bet. I said, that's what I do, folks. That's what you're paying me for. That's why you're in these sessions, and that's what I do. So what's the difference? I'm not a gambler. I'm not a gambler. I'm a technical player that slices and dices everything that goes on a daily basis, on a second to second basis, slices and dices it and come up with an advantage, at least what I feel is an advantage, uh, and then make the play.
In terms of that, though, like the differences between when you started your career and you're starting your career as a trader in